Chapter 3. The Smell of Fear. It was a sunless morning. Of course, the same could be said for every morning. For the past 12 years, the weather in Pernicious Valley had been locked at a permanent 48 degrees Fahrenheit. The skies were always grey in Widdersbury, and every season was just autumn all over again. But there were days when the wind stirred the bone-dry tree leaves in such a way that it sounded like whispers of warning, when the shadows were longer than they ought to be, and a man looked at his neighbour with more suspicion than usual. They called it the dread, and today it was especially strong. The only thing Henry Fernberger II felt, however, was the overwhelming wish to do something bad. He'd done almost all a boy could do, but it wasn't easy to upset people when one's parents were as important as the Fernbergers. So today, he was going to skip school entirely. Everyone would worry about where he'd gone, and if his parents would find out. The teachers would all be so steamed they'd want to yell at him when he came back, but they wouldn't be able to say a thing. Just the thought of it made Henry laugh out loud as he boldly strolled out of Rudyard School's front doors. On the stoop, Henry saw the familiar white blonde hair of the cook's son. Stephen Weller was on his knees, arranging a set of twigs, probably building something weird again. Freak. "If it ain't Welly," Henry said with a sneer. Stephen looked up, squinted, and then went back to building his stick contraption. There were tangled strings of dental floss mixed up in the mess, and a cracked custard dish with dirt all over it. Henry knelt beside Stephen and noticed a moth hole in the boy's coat. He smelled of stale peanut butter too. "What's that? An art project?" Henry asked. Stephen shook his head. "Ah, come on," said Henry. "I just want to know." It's an invention. I got a book about them for my birthday," Stephen answered meekly. "Nice present if you're poor," said Henry. He jumped to his feet and gave Stephen's contraption a kick, scattering twigs and floss all over the sidewalk. "Oops," he said. Stephen didn't even look up. "See you later, Welly," said Henry, and he walked off down the street snickering. What an embarrassment Welly was with his scuffed-up shoes and his hand-me-down sweaters. He didn't even go to school at Rudyard. He was taught at home, by his own father. In Henry's opinion, such people shouldn't be seen by the students. But then Henry would have one less person to torture, and that wouldn't be much fun. His walk took him to Widdersbury Park, where he soon came by the brand new Candy Time stand. Someone had defaced it since he'd seen it last. "Go home, stranger," it said, in green paint across the front of the counter.
"Hello there, sir,"
said the candy man, with a pretend salute.
"Anything I can get for you today?"
Henry stopped dead in his tracks. His throat suddenly felt dry. The newcomer. For a brief moment, he considered turning back. But then he imagined what his friends would say when he told them how he faced the stranger alone, man to man. With that thought, Henry puffed out his chest and swaggered over. He pulled out a hefty pile of change with his chubby fingers and spilled it over the counter as messily as possible. "Whatever that'll get me, as long as it's chocolate," he ordered. He wanted to see the Candyman try and count it all. But the man only pushed the money from the counter into his cash register without another glance.
"Got big plans today?"
he asked Henry, filling a paper bag with various candies. "Going up to the wood to catch some spiders," Henry answered gruffly.
"I hear you find the biggest ones just beyond the park, where the trees start,"
said the Candyman.
"You know, those big black and yellow ones that crunch when you step on them. Of course I wouldn't go in there myself. Lots of scary stories about those woods."
"Who asked you? You're not even from our town," Henry snapped. He snatched the candy without so much as a thank you and ran away, perhaps faster than he might have done had anyone else been watching. He made his way into Henbane Wood, chomping chocolate greedily as he went. With a large stick he found in the dirt, he took violent whacks at all the bushes. He liked stirring up all the critters that lived inside. Those big black and yellow spiders were his favourite. Of course, he wouldn't step on them. He'd collect them, sneak them back into the girls' school, and then wait for the screams. Whack! Nothing. Whack! Some small boring beetles. Whack! 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 Ping! Henry's stick struck something hard and snapped in two. He looked up to see what had done the damage, and was startled to find himself staring at a hair's breadth from the bared teeth of a large metal horse. Its eyes were scratched out and rusted over. A mealworm scuttled from a nostril. "Ah!" Henry shouted. "Oh," he thought when he looked again. "It's only an old carousel. Who put that here?" It was a dark and ugly thing, this carousel. It appeared that someone had been painting it quite recently, but clearly they were far from finishing the job. Stupid baby stuff, he thought, and he spat a pitiful bubble of saliva into the dirt. He was about to continue his quest for spiders when he heard someone calling his name. "Henry, Henry." The woman's voice sounded both familiar and strange, and it seemed to come from everywhere and yet nowhere, all at once. Henry couldn't see her, but he noticed with an uncomfortable feeling in his stomach that she sounded just like his beloved Nanny. The thing was, Nanny Harriet had died when he was 7. Henry was almost 13 now. "Harriet?" He swatted at something crawling on his neck, but found it was only his own hair. "Harriet, is that you? Come and find me, Henry. It's been so long since we played a game." Now the voice seemed to be coming from the carousel. Henry climbed up its rotten wooden steps and looked around. Something inside him told him he shouldn't be there, but he ignored the feeling. No one told Henry he shouldn't do something, not even himself. "Where are you? They said you died of a fever," he insisted. "I saw them put garlic flowers on you because they said you were... They said I might come back." And just like that, Harriet was sitting on one of those metal horses, holding out her arms. She looked exactly as he remembered her from when he was small, so much so that he forgot to be afraid. His vision blurred with tears, and he was grateful none of his friends could see him now. "I came back anyway," said Harriet. "They can't keep me from my little boy." Henry wiped his nose on his jacket sleeve and jumped into his nanny's arms. He sobbed and told her all of his troubles. Nothing had been the same since Harriet had passed away. Mother and father had sent him to Rudyard after that, and nobody read to him anymore. His parents rarely visited. Though they lived just on the edge of town, they were simply too busy with their charities. Why hadn't she come back sooner? "There, there," Harriet cooed. "There, there." The ride began to spin slowly. So slowly that Henry didn't notice at first. As it picked up speed, he started to feel all right again. There was nothing odd about his nanny coming back from the dead, nothing strange about the sad music blaring from the calliope. It was wonderful, that's what it was, just wonderful, like he'd never had to grow up. Except that everything was getting darker now. Life had come into the weird, half-painted horses, but they changed shape every time he blinked. Now they hissed and snapped like lizards. "This isn't fun anymore," he thought. Henry tried to wrench himself free, but his nanny's fingers dug into his arms. He couldn't move, and he wished he hadn't eaten so much chocolate. "Harriet, it's going too fast. I'm going to be sick," he said groggily. But Harriet wasn't Harriet anymore. Her hands had become talons and her eyes were nothing but gaping holes. There, croaked the Harriet thing. Henry wanted to scream, but he felt so very tired all of a sudden. He could barely hold his eyes open. No, he whimpered. Then the shadows closed in around him.